let's do this. Well, this is the last class. There's no class on a Friday. Congratulations, you made it to the end. You celebrate well. Whether it's, party or napping or binge watching some Netflix show or true. I heard some of the exam starts slower. I mean late. So yeah, maybe you get some time. I don't know. CCR3, if you have submitted, there are a few submissions that are still marked, but if you submitted by the deadline, you should have got it on a class. Okay. So if you have questions, let me know. And 4, which is about which chapter? Which chapter? 9. Yes. So that there's no choice. Sorry, everybody's on a 9, chapter 9. That's on due on Friday. How's your come on in, Curtis? How's your Friday looking like? Except the partying. Okay, so then that's else. I'm talking more work, life, academics. Why not? Hey, Jordan. Is Friday night okay still, or do you need one more day or something? You okay? Is this okay for you? Okay, we'll keep it for now, but if anything comes up, just email me, okay? Yeah, hopefully and nothing comes up for you. And if you have 5 minutes, we would greatly appreciate if you can finish the spot survey for this course and other courses. I'm pretty sure they appreciate that too. And then that's final exam information. We're gonna hopefully go over it a little more later in today's class. But today we're gonna finish chapter 9, so that could be on a final exam. The last week, it's been a while, but the first and second section of the chapter 9, we talked about definition of different category, right? Race, ethnicity, culture, visible minority, indigenous groups, so on and so forth. And we went over also some basic statistics as to why is it important that our society is changing, has changed, and is going to change more, right? In a 2041 or 2050, where you're going to be, hopefully, big manager or directors, making important decisions, you're going to have a more diverse society to serve. Now, today, we're going to talk about some theories and explanations around how we can explain and then what kind of research we have done in terms of leisure within this population. And then we dropped some of the information, so you can read the chapter for CCR4 and you see the more diverse theory, but I'm going to pick up a few. Now we're going to start with their classics. So the originally in 1970 or so, especially in the US and Forest Services and National Park System, they observed this quote unquote absence of especially African American back then, but the people of color basically, right? So they wanted to explain why there's this quote unquote underparticipation by those people. They needed a theory and they needed research. So the two theories that they came up with, and I think we mentioned in our RLS 100, but quickly, marginality and subcultural hypothesis. Marginality suggests that, well, they're not coming to the national forest, outdoor, national parks because of the lingering negative impact of especially the slavery. But now because of that, they still have a poverty. They're living in a poverty. They don't have enough socioeconomic resources to come. Right? They're busy working. They're still poor. They're trying to make ends meet every day. Come on in, Aline. The other theory hypothesis is called the subcultural hypothesis, which is no, some of the people don't come because, well, they don't want to, or they want something else, actually. It's just differences in a preference. Hey, Luke, just seen. Okay, so those are two explanations. Now, notably, they're limited. They're not the only obviously reasons. They apply to some people. But if you think about, for example, this is a classic example at the very top. The many Black Americans, and maybe some of the Black Canadians, well, it's maybe more Indigenous Canadians too, that they have this intergenerational memory that they don't let kids go to the woods. Because why? That's where your grandfather was killed. He was taken, he was killed there, You never go there alone. And that's instilled from childhood, and they become an adult, make a family. When that happens, there's this collective memory that that's not the place to recreate. That's not the place for fun. And also, even like some visible minority and let's say newer income, newer immigrants, new Canadians, if you will, they're not necessarily went through some slavery or anything, obviously, but not in here at least. They may be still working in low-paying occupation jobs and have less legal resources. We did some research over there last year and talking to new immigrants here, people of color, and we were talking about sports of your children. Hey, what kind of sports do you know? What kind of barriers do you face? What do you mean barriers? I work in my family, me and my partner works 4 or 5 jobs. Do you see how that feels like? 5 jobs in a different part of the city. So we don't have a time, we don't have a money for sports. So that was easy, but that doesn't really quite fit with, for example, the marginality hypothesis either, because, well, they didn't go through slavery. They are still going through some socioeconomic challenges, though. The last one, that's just my personal stuff. I don't just go there because I don't like bugs much, to be honest. That's what it is. Is that subcultural hypothesis? Maybe, but I don't know. I loved the bugs when I was a kid, but then I grew up. So there you go. It happens. So those hypotheses have limitations. They explain a little bit, but not too much. It's weak. Now, the way we also testing them is problematic. This part. That the way it works in a research, or we test it, is that basically we observe some lower participation among racial minority group, okay? And we see if that under participation disappears when we statistically correct or statistically taken into account the effect of socioeconomic status, like income level, education level, so on and so forth. We'll see if that statistically correct everything, and then, after considering those things, we don't see much differences between the racial minority and outer group, right? If that happens, if the differences, quote unquote, disappears statistically, then we say, that was because of, we observed the difference because of these things, therefore we're supporting this marginality hypothesis. Or this past research, they said, if that didn't happen, right, the difference didn't disappear, after taking into account of the impact of this guy's socioeconomic status, then the alternative, which is subcultural hypothesis, should be right. And then you probably think like, well, if that's only 2 hypotheses or 2 possible explanations, that's how it works. But if there are other explanations, that's not how it works, right? This could be wrong, or this is not maybe strong explanation. That doesn't mean that this is supported or this is true. There may be theory B, hypothesis D, E, F, God knows how many explanations, right? How many factors. So they weren't doing that. They weren't testing in a rigorous way. They were testing either or binary thinking. Now, so that's the many other reasons part. Also, both hypotheses tend to focus on the under participation. Okay, because that's how the research started. Okay, we don't have, let's say, Black American in the national parks. Why? That's what the question was, really, in 1970, 60. That doesn't help. Those theories tend not to help. Okay, we observe actually certain leisure activity, greater participation by this quote unquote minority group. What's happening? Why? How can we support that more? Or how can we actually let other groups to learn that kind of whatever physically active, leisure or cultural leisure, whatever? How can we do this? These theories don't help because they're about under participation rather than greater participation. So I'm gonna choose 2 theories other than these traditional 2 that explains under participation and greater participation. The first one is discrimination or perceived discrimination. That's the about under participation side, obviously. This is probably obvious. If anybody, right, anybody, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, but if you go to certain leisure space and you experience discrimination, you feel like discriminated, you're not going to go back there, probably, right? You go like, what the heck? I'm not good. I'm just done. And that's basically, there are two types of discrimination we talk about. And first kind is perceived discrimination. This is basically more of an individual discrimination. One feels that we're discriminated by somebody else, whether it's the group or a particular person, okay? And that person can be other user, park user, could be staff member. Sometimes, unfortunately, that happens. Or could be someone like third party, like law enforcement officers who, have jurisdiction around that area, may harass people. It happens too, we know that, right? It could come from different individuals. Nonetheless, it's person to person kind of thing. Hey, Josh. Now, the other kind of discrimination we're going to talk about is this one. Institutional discrimination. This one is trickier, and this one is arguably, quote unquote, a little more important because perceived discrimination, it's clear. Clearer, I would say, that, ooh, you're saying something hateful to me, or you're doing something against us. It's clearer. But this one, institutional discrimination, is that people cannot do certain leisure activity or enjoy it because of the barriers that typically an agency, even sometimes government, often unintentionally, without intention of discriminating certain people, created. I think I've used this example before, so I'm going to quickly go through it. That sometimes park agency make a, this kind of picnic table, fits 4 to 6 people probably, right? And you can get that like a little chat of things over here that the baby can sit over here, right? If you want to, but that's the max. If you have your family, greater family, not just a new, 2 generation, but also your aunties and uncles and everybody, you're coming from certain culture background, whether it's a Hispanic background or Indian, Punjabi background, for example, or Filipino background. Let's say you're likely to, recreate it with the 15 people. This isn't going to make it, right? I mean, of course, you can bring more chair, but it's bolted. Obviously, when people made this design and put it in this table, they didn't think about, oh, we're going to discriminate some people. No, that's not how it works. But this idea helps us that actually think about each object, facility, environment we're creating, the policy we're making. We may be actually unintentionally creating such barriers, which actually systematically and disproportionately impact certain people. I have another example recently. City of Edmonton. They have some outdoor field, right? Suckers and their baseballs and whatnot. So some of the Punjabi communities here, they wanted to play. Do you know the sports that they love? Popular? Huh? Cricket. Yes, thank you. They wanted to play cricket. So in the cricket, except the helmets and all that kind of good stuff, there's something special, a little special. It's actually 3 stick plus on top of it that has to go into the ground. Have you seen it? One of those things? And they wanted to do it, and they wanted to get a permission from the city. And they go, and the department goes, no, you can't do that. And they go, why? Well, you're going to put those things in, and you could damage the ground wrong. And that could be, well, many reasons. Well, that's prohibited. According to them, that's no good. That's based on a rule, that's not okay. And that could be a liability for them too. If that's damaged, the next kid, next group of kids come in and just trip over, that could be a liability too. So when if there's a rule or not, I'm not sure, actually, I didn't review their policies just yet. But when they make any policies like, oh, you cannot stick anything into the ground, for example, they don't necessarily probably think about certain groups, especially when the rules was made probably 50 years ago, right? But then now that the demographics have changed, that becomes an issue. So sometimes it happens like that over time as well. Now, this is where I want to spend a little time and think about example. The textbook cited a four plus actually one. David Scott, this guy from Texas A&M, he identified 4 ways how public regulation look. Mm-hmm.
Picnic tables
Mm.
are in wilderness and having those areas to be in nature, not to have a massive long dining table everywhere.
This is not necessarily like wilderness though. It could be in Hollick Park. That's not wilderness.
Build tables that are designed to fit more than that's just a ridiculous.
I understand. No, I understand that. That's well, actually, Hollick Park has some bigger, wider table in there, some roofed area.
Yeah, those are designated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the thing. Our idea of, oh, those are not. The point is that that's socially construed. Make sense? We grew up in the culture, the way that we look at the park, the way that we look at the nature, the way that we look at the family. That's the point. It's instilled in us. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Everybody has it, whether they're coming from Canada or outside. The point is that that's actually the crush is happening right now, that the demographics are changing. The people with a different family structure coming, family values are coming. Whether we like it or not, the clash is happening. Now, what are we going to do as a leisure recreation service providers? Some people see this as that's the way it is. Some people go see this first time coming here and then like, what the heck is this? How are we using this? The fact that it's bolted down. But then we know, whoa, that's where the security is, and nobody's going to take away, nobody's going to move around, nobody's going to push over. That's very important. All those priorities are actually, it's not quote unquote set in stone or universal rules or universal truth, right? It's how we have socially historically chosen. But now we have greatly changed our society. Luke, you're right. A lot of people see this the way you do. But also, I just want to point it out with the statistics that I showed last week, a lot of people don't see, go like, oh, this is different. Now, what are we going to do? What do you think?
I think it's a big push to make bigger picnic tables faster.
Interesting.
Especially in recreation areas such as parks.
Beach makes sense.
Beaches as well as
Mhm.
people get lost
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I would argue too, I don't think that there are as many, and I could be wrong with this, but for the cultures that have larger families, I don't think that they have, recreation picnic areas such as like a Horlack Park. I don't think those are super big in other places in the world. Like, I think that's more a Canadian thing.
It is. Actually, some cultures are like, just go out there, put the bunch of blankets, and just hang out, right? And now we have tables, that's great. But then the tables suggest certain family structure. That's an interesting thing. I'm not saying we all should change. We go out and take out all the picnic table and change it. But that's the tension. And I want you to be aware of it. Every single thing. And picnic table is the quote unquote the most mundane thing I want you to think about. Oh, I never thought about this thing, Or even the lawn, because I thought that it's a good idea to not do just like, dig a hole. Not digging a hole, stabbing stuff in the ground. Okay, but it makes sense. Okay. So what are we going to do? Because you're going to get a lot of those things if you're working for cities. Now, provided we're talking about this important, hey, Joe, public recreation, public. Okay, so things to get quite a bit of different if we're talking about private sectors, obviously. where the private comes in, the client's money used for the clients more of. But the public, we're using basically tax money, right? So David Scott identified four issues four ways in which we can create potentially institutional discrimination. Now I want you to think about it, because some of those ways, mechanism, sounds good actually. It makes sense. But if anybody, when you get a job, and let's say you're brainstorming, maintenance plan or programming plan or whatever, and you go like, hey, our discussion is based off of that. I want you to, hopefully in back side of your head, like, ooh, are we doing this? The first way being, quote unquote, too entrepreneur. Now that may sound weird for you because it's a public, but there's a lot of pressure on the public agencies, government included, to generate revenue and to actually don't be financially debt, in the debt, basically, right? And that's dangerous according to David Scott, because with that kind of approach, we sometimes look at, okay, we have, let's say, 50 offering of programs. Which one is making money? Which one is not making money? Which one is going to survive? Well, the one that making money makes sense, but they make sense based on a certain perspective, based off of a certain perspective. It obviously overlooks some of the equity issues around there. Okay, if you cut it. Okay, what people are we actually serving as a public agency? That's something that we have to think about. The decision process may be, okay, it may be about money, but we also have to think about maybe the group of people we're serving as well. The second is emphasis a little too much on quote unquote loyalty to the existing customer. Okay, these are the people who come to our service right now, so we're going to prioritize them first. Well, that wouldn't make sense probably if it's a private club, maybe golf club, tennis club, yacht club, maybe. Well, personally, I'd be okay with that. But with the public, you might want to think about it. Okay, what's the diversity we have in our society? Like, for example, city of Edmonton, we just learned that over 40% is visible minority. Okay, so is that actually proportionate here, or that's one of the things that many sports agencies in Edmonton is talking about? Maybe Park. Third is lack of staff diversity and training around that, diversity training. And that's not necessary that they don't want to, then there's actually challenges from the agency side too. I just talked to the sports agency too, that they're struggling to actually recruit and retain diverse candidates because they don't have that connection and they don't, relationship actually with the community. And training too. It's not like they have gazillions of dollars, right? The fourth is this narrow idea of need, and also assuming that it's equally easy and possible for everyone to just do it. It's not it's kind of like a Nike slogan that we may have idea, oh, if people want to do certain things, use our program facility, they're going to just do it. The fact that they don't do it or they don't show up means that they don't want to do it. It's kind of like a subcultural hypothesis. Well, that's not necessarily true. That we learn, for example, a certain family group with a certain lower income level struggles with their private vehicle and also the public transit in the Edmonton, right? Which doesn't necessarily bring you to everywhere. I guess they're trying. But they make a bridge and the bridge is actually cracking. So we'll see how that goes. But, they're trying, right? I'm a little cynical about the public transit here because I'm from Tokyo, but that's good. It's all good. Tokyo has its bad too, really. Anyway, but we cannot assume that it's equally easy, that, the capacity and the resources are not equally distributed. And the last one that Shari Ebiska and colleagues added here, fifth one, is the differential maintenance. Actually, their research was around the Chicago area, so US example, but they realized based on the quote, we have this idea in Edmonton too, though, right? If you think about, hey, I'll give you a $1 million and you're going to buy a house. Where are you going to buy a house? You have some ideas of quote unquote good neighborhoods, right? Not good neighborhoods. Don't you? Good schools there, There are good, some, beautiful parks there, green space, right? We know those things. Those things exist in Edmonton too. And then what they realize is that in their own city too, the parks are differently maintained, that they actually get the different amount of maintenance visit from the departments. And they're, well, visibly different too, very much so too, depending on the neighborhoods you're in. So I want you to think about it too. In institutional discrimination, how that could happen in their field of industry area, whether it's a park, camp, sports, youth, recreation therapy, institutional discrimination could happen. And which one of those 5 things may be some of the reasons why? I'll take like 2 minutes. Let's talk. First of all, what do you want to do? It's the end of the semester. It's a good time to think about what kind of job you want. The park, tourism, or just say like, you know what, recreation, sports, and tourism doesn't have the money. I'm gonna just like go to business. That's fine. It applies. Even if you go to banking, this could apply. Okay. I'll respect your decision. So, what kind of field do you want to go? That's fine. Choose one for now, for the entertainment purpose. Dream big. Okay. Community rec. Sounds good. City of Edmonton community recreation. So how does institutional discrimination could happen across different groups? Let's use the cricket example. Okay. Okay. So which one of these things may be potentially affecting that decision? Think about it. Janine, okay? Oh. So, what do you think? What kind of job you want to get? I know, Krista, you have an idea. Just give me, fill it. You being a coordinator at the YMCA, good, because YMCA is, well, it's not for profit, right? Technically not for profit. Okay, but it's, let's pretend that's the public for now. Okay, so what kind of issue could exist? Institutional discrimination.
Like not being like accessible, like sometimes the workout centers are upstairs.
Oh, like a physically universities. Yeah, okay. So, okay, what kind of issues might be potentially affecting that? The fact that there's this inaccessible gym. Number 4. Nah. So yeah, we don't get the people with a certain physical impairment condition because they don't want to use ours. But and then you go like, have you looked at your stairs, right?
And it's like in the workout center, like too close together. So it makes it
There's no space, right? Enough, with a wheelchair, for example, there's no space in that. Sometimes it's entrepreneur, or entrepreneur is not necessarily the best word, but that's the word that they use. Like, making that, adding something like there's when there's a stairs, there's elevator kind of thing that kind of goes with it, right? You can add that, but that's tens of thousands of dollars. Okay. And I go like, yeah, but if you do the cost saving analysis, cost benefit analysis, it's not gonna make money. True. True, because that's costly to put it in a certain area, the center, for example, of the building. It sounds smart. Yeah, that doesn't financially make sense. Yeah, true. But if we are in a public domain, then we have to think about, ooh, sure, but that's Is that the first thing that we should be worried about? Obviously, we have a financial responsibility to an extent. Can you think about anything? Are you okay? Uni? Yeah, cool. All right, an example? This is like, oh, he's looking at me. No, just kidding. Could be anybody. I need a one. I need a one.
I want to talk about the differential maintenance and management.
Okay.
Just because I work with
Okay.
and I know that a lot of parks that are a lot heavier used or more intensive
Ah,
do get maintained a lot more, but there's just a lot of trans populations going through and kind of like an ongoing battle, whereas the ones near outside of the city don't get maintained as much, but it doesn't need it as much.
yes.
There is heavier maintenance on the interior ones that need more management, but
Yes.
there's a lot more to do, and it might look trashy.
Yeah.
in city center. But
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's like an optics.
Yeah.
You don't really see them working.
That's a very good point because it's not absolute like, okay, we can visit them, rotate them once like equally, right? Within a certain period of time. That's not how it works because some parks are used more and by used in a very different ways. Inner city park or green space, whatever the open space is, right? Versus suburban area.
I know there's different departments that look over like southeast, southwest. And then when it comes to city center, there's a lot more groups that look over a smaller area, as well as there's a team that looks over cleaning up.
Right.
Like transient population.
Yeah.
Like, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there's like 3-4 teams looking over one area as opposed to one team looking over a greater area. So I don't know if that's.
I think that's a good idea. Well, no, okay, so it's okay. Let me be clear. Differential maintenance, by which they meant that not necessarily they're not advocating for sameness. They're probably advocating for the equitable or equity. That based on the demands and needs, obviously, if the parks are more used, quote unquote, used by many people, it makes sense that that park needs more attention and money investment. And it makes sense to break that grid, quote unquote, grid of the maintenance team smaller in that area. And I'm pretty sure probably that's what they're doing in the Chicago area too, because it's big from very, very highly dense inner city to the suburban area. And I'm glad to actually hear that in Edmonton, that in the city, we have that smaller, tighter units and tighter space, because that means hopefully they get more people per space, more attention, more money, hopefully. And which that's actually different. That's different, but it's probably proportionate to the use, which makes sense, which probably should be. If actually we treat them equal without thinking about that kind of use and how it's used, probably that's actually going to be this example, differential maintenance. Make sense? Hopefully that kind of clarifies what they're trying to say. Okay. So the reality is very complex. And when you started to say that, and some people, constituents go like, oh, justify, like, why are we doing this? Why are we not getting more, for example, attention in the suburban area? And sometimes we have, as a city, public agency, we have accountability around that too. Now, the last explanation I want to show, so now that one was about under participation. This one tends to do well with their greater participation. So I'm sharing and I'm expanding on this, called ideal effect. And it's social psychological theory too. The other one tends to be more sociological, to be honest. But so ideal effect proposed by this, I think Julie Scott. She's a psychologist at the Stanford University. She realized that actually it's not just emotion, it's not about how we feel, but there's something about how we want to feel. It's like you're stressed out in the final exam seasons and you want to feel more relaxed. You're not feeling a lot of relaxation, but you want to feel that way. That's the ideal effect. And they're actually, evidence shows that they're separable. They're not the same thing. how we want to feel and how we actually feel. Probably you can attest that in your life. Like, yeah, that's not the same thing, right? And there are actually greater cultural, more distinctive cultural patterns, this Thai argue, in the ideal side, not actual side. Well, you know what? Because actual emotions are conditioned by the environments, for example, we live in, right? Things we do, things that happen like a pandemic, for example. But what we want is right here, and that there's more cultural patterns, systematic patterns. For example, East Asians, Chinese people, for example, were known to prefer relaxation more than other emotions. And the gaps between ideal and actual emotion, that's what, according to this theory and concept, drives people's behavior. So ideally, if you want to feel this much of relaxation, let's say, right? But you actually feel this much, there's this gap. And that leads us to actual behavior. And behavior including leisure. Sorry, there's a bar chart, okay? Gaps. And arguably, that's more relevant to leisure because how many times we go like, hey, I want to feel more excitement, or I want to feel more relaxation, boss, give me that job. That's not how it works work-wise, right? Or study, or academic life, or family sometimes even, right? But the leisure is the area we may have a little more control over how we want to, how we can feel. And then that's very relevant to leisure. In terms of cultural differences, Tsai and a colleague found that East Asian and Asian, broadly speaking, they tend to prefer low arousal positive. I'm going to take you back to chapter 4. We talked about circumplex model of emotion, this kind of thing, clock-like model of emotions, from activated to deactivated emotion, pleasure, pleasant, to displeasure, not pleasure, emotion. So we're talking about these two things now. Low arousal positive, relaxation. They're suggesting that, generally speaking, East Asian people, generally is very important. I'm going to come back to that. We want to be here versus actually research suggests that Westerner people tends to be Westerner. Who is Westerner? But North American people, Canadians and US American, fall this into group for sure, want to be here. Sorry. High arousal positive. So, for example, Asian people tends to actually seek calming leisure experiences, such as Tai Chi. Where's the Tai Chi from? Do you know Tai Chi? You know, that slow movement thing? If you do it like deceivingly hard, right? Where's that from? Where's Tai Chi from? China, yes. Thank you. Family social. Where's yoga from, by the way? India, Nepal. There may be some debate about where that comes from, but that's South Asian continent, right? Too. So lap, right? Hap, excitement, that type of emotions. North American people may generally, once again, quote unquote, seek that too, like things like maybe kickboxing, partying at the club. First time partying at the club in North America, US, that was an experience for me. Like yelling at this distance, literally. That was very fun to me. It was fun. Now, actually, Tsai did a research around dream or ideal vacation destination choice. Euro-American, in her study, actually, they identified with the HAP state, and they wanted to choose destination based off of, ooh, I would want to explore and do exciting things. They may be going to Australia, Madagascar, I don't know. Hong Kong Chinese in her study identified with the LAP state, and that was their destination choice decider, going to a place where I could totally relax. I don't want to stereotype, but I'm definitely here because this is my dream destination right now. I just want to go there 2 weeks, 1 month, nothing, and just chill. Thailand, beautiful place. My parents went there for a honeymoon, so I thought it was a good destination. Anyway, but okay, so I was saying generally. So we conducted research recently, and we found with the Japanese people, so they should prefer which emotion? Lower arousal or higher arousal? We're talking about Japanese. Lower arousal, so they should be preferring lower arousal. Thank you. Now, first of all, first thing we found is that we measured ideal effect, the ideal like preferred emotion in an everyday and tourism context, two different things. So life in general versus in tourism, when you're making tourism destination choice, what kind of emotion do you want to feel, right? They're actually statistically separable. Now, what we found was that, not so surprisingly, it was a tourism ideal effect that predicted. We were doing longitudinal study. So we did one survey and they actually went to the trip. We didn't pay for their trips, don't worry. They went to their trip and we did a survey again afterwards. So we had tourism ideal effect measured at the first time point, first survey. We also measured actual tourism effect, like how they felt in a tourism trip, after they came back from trip, right? It was a tourism ideal effect that predicted this actual emotional experiences during the trip. So they wanted to feel, for example, relaxed in a tourism context, and those are the people actually did something relaxing in their trips. Everyday or general ideal effect didn't significantly predict at all. So maybe the life domain is important. That psychologists keep doing this, that they generalize and they're like, yeah, I don't care if it's a tourism or work or leisure, it doesn't matter. I feel like there's general pattern. There may be, when you look at that, look that way. But if you actually look domain specific thing, we see this kind of pattern. And more importantly, these Japanese tourists actually preferred HAP, high arousal positive emotion, as much as low arousal positive in the context of tourism. So everyday general ideal effect consistent with the what size predicted. They wanted to feel relaxation more, significantly more so than high, like for example, excitement, right? But then when they were asked specifically about tourism, that difference disappeared. So maybe there are cultural specific domains, especially in a leisure setting like sports, camping, tourism, right? Where those quote unquote general cultural patterns may flip or disappears. And that's important for us to know. Because if you think that this is happening generally everywhere, in every context, and hey, you're Japanese people, you're gonna like these like hot springs and whatnot, and they go like, no, give me some zip lining too. That programming, marketing, all those things has to be informed of, okay, not just the general pattern, but also domain specific pattern in your field. What do they want? So that's the end of it, basically, end of the course too. So just to summarize a little bit of things and their conclusion of the entire course as well, but we need a more research. We need a more evidence-based practice. Hopefully you look at the evidence when you make practice decisions and policies and whatnot to effectively serve increasingly diverse population. That's what we're getting, like it or not. And the chapter suggested, and I suggest two things. That first, we probably want to start focusing on intra-group differences. We have done some work around, let's say, okay, indigenous people, right? Or Black Canadian. But there are so much difference in that quote unquote group, right? You start to look at that. And your program is actually informed by those nuances. The second is that looking at both similarities and differences. The last part about our study is very important. The Japanese people like a HAP too, depending on the, if it's a tourism context. Sometimes research is focused on the differences. We want to see, quote unquote, you're taking RLS 210 too, right? We want to see statistical difference. So you see publication with the difference, literally. Then we create this mentality that, oh, there's so many differences, this difference, that difference, this, we're so different. But reality is actually, so we actually suck. Researchers suck at the showing similarities. We do actually. The science is not equipped with that well. But there are obviously similarities, and sometimes we have to actually look at that because that really bridges us, right? Oh, you like that too. Oh, we like that too. Let's do that together. There's so much value to it too. So hopefully that helps move toward a more inclusive leisure in general. Here, whatever area you're going into, I don't know how many years you have until you get the job, but you know, it's gonna happen. I'll give you a choice now. Do you want to talk about guest lectures quickly, go over the blanks, or do you want to take extra 5 minutes coffee time? If you want to take a coffee time, you can go. I'll put their slides up just in case. So this, I put this together for with this final exam sample. So you see this file at the very end of the year. E-class right now. But there are some questions so with the guest lectures, I'm going to be honest with you. And I know you have a lot to study. Just working on this. Okay. Don't worry about the entire lectures. There are a lot of good stuff discussed though. I don't want to discredit that. That's great stuff in there. But for the final exam, worry about this because I don't want you to rewatch, the entire lecture. That's a lot. Okay. Anyway, so Carrie encouraged us to explore the question behind our favorite leisure activity because it helps us to. That's where she did activity, right? She asked us like, "Oh, what's your favorite leisure?" And she asked, "Why?" She asked why. And that's what I try to do too. Because then she said, you notice the benefits, right? You become aware and explicit about it. And now you can talk about that, or you can practice that. Second point, Carrie said in our recreation therapy, we don't look at the certain aspect of person, but we look at the whole person, the entire person, okay? Carrie identified the concept of, she was talking about this hex. I think that's a jargon terminology, so I wanted to clarify that. It's a physical, emotional, cognitive, social, and spiritual aspect of well-being. Yeah, that's more of our allied health stuff. But the well-being, we talked about it in this course too. Right? Well-being is the key concept that bridges their field and what we're talking about. Carrie emphasized the importance of working interdisciplinary across the field, like physical therapy, occupational therapy, SLP, which means speech language pathologist, and social worker, SW. Okay. But that is not just about rec therapy, though. If you go to, for example, park or community rec, you're working with the different people too. You're working with for example, urban planners, you're working with a different discipline. So it's very important to have that wide perspective. Carrie stressed the importance of certain kind of education because there are always new knowledge, new things coming up. So what kind of education do we need? Continuous, ongoing. I will take any of that. So that sounds depressing. You're like, Shin, I'm going through my degree. Are you saying that we have to keep doing this? Eventually you get paid to do the training, okay? So don't worry about it. It feels very different to like learn by getting paid versus learn when you have to pay. I'll tell you, you'll get there. Okay, Carrie mentioned that the concept of something and its three conditions are often used by recreational therapists. She mentioned actually a couple of theories and concepts that we learn and they use, but this one is flow. All right, chapter 5, psychologically deep experience flow. Right there. The final study guide specifies at the very top of the key topics some of the key concepts that appear from the previous section, and that's one of them is flow. Okay. Dr. Haidong Liang specified 3 aspects of ageism, which are look, go ahead. Awesome. Perfect. You get the 100% on that. You heard it? We're kind of time's up. So the rest of it, I'm gonna put it up on E-class, the rest of it. But you got these things up, you know, in your notes. So I'm not gonna share that part. Okay? You're in the class, you got those notes, good for you. I'm gonna ask at least one question from each of those guest lectures, at least. Okay? Hopefully you take some refresher after the semester, some leisure before getting into the final exam. Good luck. If you have any questions, you email me, okay? See you. I will see you on April 25th, and then hope you're not gonna be like, I'm here, Shin. This is my final exam. Good luck. Aiden.